All right, hello and welcome back, to the Sean Cutler podcast. We'll call it that till I got a concrete name for it. But this episode is going to be about the Hawkeyes of Iowa and the Cyclones of Iowa State and their football and basketball programs. Just a little bit. We're going to start with Iowa football here, and I did try to record one last week before the weekend, and I messed it up, and it didn't save my 60 minutes of blabbering on, which is fine because both Iowa and Iowa State laid an egg this past weekend in their games. But one thing Iowa is not looking to lay an egg on is the transfer portal, and they're off to a terrific start. As they were able to land one of the top quarterbacks in the portal, Cade McNamara, former Michigan Wolverine, former Big Ten champion, former college football playoff participant quarterback for the Michigan Wolverines. Now, was it all him by any means? No, it wasn't. But he was able to execute his part of that offense all year long last season, and of course this year lost his job to five-star recruit J.J. McCarthy, and then got hurt and then decided to rehab in California. As J.J. McCarthy said, though, he continued to check in, make sure everything was good with his teammates, and now he entered the transfer portal last week, and just like that, today, this is December 1st, Thursday, and when I'm recording this, I don't know if I'll get it actually out and published tonight. I'll try. But the Hawks got Cade McNamara, and that's huge. That is absolutely huge. And I'm not going to say he's going to be the savior of our offense, but my goodness, is it like the quarterback outlook for Iowa was not looking good next year. You pretty much had maybe Spencer Petras returns, or you go to Joey Labus, who has no experience on the field whatsoever yet for the Hawkeyes, because Alex Padilla entered the transfer portal as well. And I'm assuming with the McNamara transfer, that must mean Petras is going to move on. He's a facilitator. He's not your typical Iowa quarterback. He's definitely, like, as far as build goes, much closer to Padilla. But as far as skill set goes, is much better than any of the Iowa quarterbacks we've seen the last couple of seasons. He's, I guess what you could say, the way I would put him is a very good Big Ten quarterback. And I think he's perfect for Iowa and perfect for the Big Ten West, because he doesn't turn the ball over. He had 6 interceptions last year, and I think 2 or 3 of them came against Georgia in that semifinal game. I know when heading into like week 11 last year, he only had like 1 on the season. He takes care of the football really well. He's got a little mobility, which is huge because, Iowa's offensive line was pretty bad this year, but they return a lot, so hopefully it'll be improved next year. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but he had a net positive in rushing yards for Michigan, which was a very good O-line, but he has the ability to escape some of that pressure. Like a lot of the sacks that Petras took this year, McNamara would have been able to prolong those plays. He's not a crazy athlete, but I mean, he was a 4-star out of high school for a reason. He has a nice skill set. The floor for him is very, very high. The floor is high, and that's the kind of stuff that Kirk Ferentz loves, high floors. Obviously, he's good at picking potential out in recruiting for defenders and tight ends and such. But as far as quarterback goes, he likes high floors. He likes guys who aren't going to make mistakes, aren't going to hurt you in the long run, and that's Cade McNamara to the T. I'm really excited about it. I didn't think he would commit this quick. I figured I mean, he must have had this destination. He must have had Iowa as a destination in mind. I know he probably I mean, it's a very similar offense to Michigan. It's just Michigan, of course, is much more, as far as like pro-style offenses go. Like the goal, I shouldn't say it's similar to Michigan. That's not what necessarily what I mean. I just mean like the goal of Iowa's offense is to be like Michigan's offense, a balanced offense, a little more run heavy, and able to run the football to set up the passing game. That's Michigan's offense, and they do it they do a pro-style offense, probably the best pro-style offense in the country this year, because like all the other good offenses aren't necessarily pro-style offenses anymore. But Jim Harbaugh and his offensive group of coaches and players run that offense terrifically. We saw them, and we saw J.J. McCarthy open it up in the passing game against Ohio State, and they ran past Ohio State beautifully this weekend. McNamara, the writing was on the wall for him with McCarthy being a young, talented quarterback, beating him out this year. I mean, he was going to transfer, and he did. And I think he had Iowa in mind. He knows their philosophy of what they want to do. They didn't do it very well this year, but what they want to do when they're working at their best is the kind of offense he will excel at. Is quarterbacks take care of the ball, but he will give us more. He's definitely more dynamic than Petrus. I'm assuming his arm's not as strong as Petrus, but he's much, much more accurate. And I mean, I saw some comments on Twitter, just looking over Twitter, you know, a little Hawk fan base. They're like, "Oh, he'd be crazy to come here. He's not going to be the savior of the offense. He doesn't really like." And they were saying it's I don't know. There's just a little bit of negativity out there, but I mean, for me, when you've had Spencer Petras / Alex Padilla for the last 3 seasons, kudos to those guys. Probably 2 of the most mentally tough guys there are, as far as quarterbacks go. I mean, Spencer Petras, unreal mental toughness to do what he did and go what he went through the last couple of years as the starting quarterback of the Iowa Hawkeyes. And to handle it the way he did was incredible, and I admire the heck out of him for it. Because I know, I mean, I've said my piece of Spencer Petras slander, not necessarily in the public eye by any means, but definitely to my friends and my family, all that, when I'm playing couch coach. But I mean, McNamara, he's the kind of quarterback. He's not your usual 6'3", 6'4", 220+ pound quarterback that we've seen Ferentz, you know, fall in love with over his tenure at Iowa. But he is that kind of quarterback is exactly what Ferentz wants to run this offense. And I feel like to be able to get him, I feel like we must have promised him, you know, some change in the offense. I can't imagine he would have came here knowing that our offense is going to be the same as it was. It's going to be ran the same as it was as this past season. Not to say, I mean, Iowa's totally unattractive as a spot for a quarterback. I mean, you're not going to put up numbers. So if you're in the transfer portal, if you're a quarterback in the transfer portal and you're chasing big numbers, if you're chasing stardom, Iowa's not the place for you, obviously. But if you're chasing a program that is, you know, values the football and wins, will get wins by any means. And honestly, in a very weak division in the Big Ten West, with the hires of Matt Rule and Luke Fickell for Nebraska and Wisconsin, I mean, it's going to get a lot tougher, obviously, with, you know, Minnesota doing what they're doing, Illinois doing what they're doing, and I think Pat Fitzgerald is in Northwestern are bound to bounce back. But nonetheless, Iowa does have some pieces on offense that make them very attractive. Now, okay, I shouldn't say very attractive. That was a false statement by me. I shouldn't have said that. Make them somewhat attractive. They have the wide receiver core is kind of a mess, and we'll get to that in a second. But we have a tight end who is going to be a budding star, the next star tight end at Iowa, Luke Lachey. We saw him in the second half of last season. We saw him develop even more this year and improve. And then when Laporta went down with his injury against Minnesota and then was out against Nebraska, we saw Lachey flourish with like 13 catches for 150-some yards. He was terrific. Big body, 6'6", 240, 250 pounds. He'll get even stronger next year. Probably will be even better at blocking next year, because I know this year he didn't look the best as a blocking tight end, but as a receiving tight end, he's there already, and he's going to get better next year. That's an attractive piece. We have Caleb Johnson, who broke the Iowa freshman rushing record. He's terrific. He's a special talent. He still needs to develop a little bit, but man, gosh, his ability to hit that hole and then just stay on his feet and then his breakaway speed, it doesn't look like he's breaking away. He doesn't look like he's running that fast, but he is. He's pulling away from defenders. We saw it again. He had another terrific game to finish off the regular season against Nebraska. And then the offensive line was bad this year, but we return everyone other than Jack Plum, our right tackle, and maybe Nick DeYoung, who played a lot at right guard. I don't know if he'll come back or not. I don't know for sure if he has another year of eligibility, but even so, we had Bo Stevens play a lot at guard. Tyler Ellsbury play a lot at guard this year. And then Caden Proctor is coming next year. That's the report. Like, he's already been committed, but he has been taking his visits, which is his former high school teammate and current Iowa Hawkeye, Xavier Wankpa, and former high-profile recruit, told him to take your visits, have some fun. He went to Oregon. I think he went to Auburn, Alabama this last week. I don't know for that for sure. It was rumored. I don't know if he actually went to the Iron Bowl. But it does sound like Caden Proctor will still commit to the Hawkeyes, and that's huge because he's 6'7", 330 pounds. He was probably ready to play college football a year or two ago, and he'll be coming in. He'll probably be our right tackle next year. I wouldn't doubt it. And he'll at least be in the rotation because Ferentz does like to rotate offensive linemen in the offense. I think we played probably 7 a game this year. So, I mean, McNamara is huge, and I think it could have a domino effect as far as other transfer portal targets go. I mean, I'm assuming. I mean, they have to probably get at least 2 wide receivers in the transfer portal now. And I don't know. It could attract more. Maybe another offensive lineman for depth, maybe another tight end, who knows. But the domino effect of Cade McNamara coming to Iowa and a very, 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 very competent quarterback who has shown success at an elite program like Michigan coming to Iowa, that's huge. That is absolutely massive. And I have a feeling to get him to commit, they must have promised change. Or maybe McNamara just felt like Kinnick was where he wanted to be. Who knows? But we'll figure that out as we go along. Some more transfer portal stuff with Iowa. Moving on a little bit here. Keegan Johnson announced either today or yesterday that he's out. He's transferring away. A really frustrating year for him, dating him back to the bowl game last year. And it's really too bad. He's a terrific talent. I was hoping we'd see him in black and gold for 4 years and then he'll go to the NFL. Because, I mean, he came on the scene as a freshman against Colorado State. His third game of the season. And he just blew by the corner. Two separate plays, got 2 large gains. One was a touchdown. I was like, oh, man. Oh, this guy. I haven't seen this kind of explosiveness at wide receiver. Well, Amir Smith-Marset was probably, kind of like that. But Keegan Johnson, and then he ended up leading us in receiving yards as a true freshman. But then before the bowl game, this really hurt us. Before the bowl game, he was out with a sickness, and that stung. And then he had injuries throughout spring ball, and then throughout summer practices and camp. He had the hamstring injury, and then through the first 2 games, Iowa's offense was so terrible. They probably forced him, or not they. I just think overall there's a lot of pressure outside the program, inside the program. I was listening to the Hawk Central podcast with Chad Lysicow and Kennington Lloyd Smith earlier. What their thoughts were on that, and sounds like maybe there's just a lot of pressure in and outside the program for him to. I mean, they just needed some more weapons out there on the field early on. He came back against Nevada, re-injured his hamstring, and then, pretty much missed the rest of the season. He did come back against Nebraska, but only played 7 snaps. And, I think just after a year, frustrating as it was, Iowa's offense not looking too great. He saved a season of eligibility if he needs it. And he's going to go somewhere, and I think he'll be really successful. Hopefully not Nebraska. Hopefully not Iowa State, because he's from Omaha. I don't want to see him go to Nebraska. But his dad did. They just hired Matt Rule, and his dad was a Nebraska great. So it was huge to get him in the first place, steal him away from Nebraska. But I wouldn't be surprised if he transferred back to Nebraska, as they run a much more. Even under. Mickey Joseph, Scott Frost this past year. We won't talk about Mickey Joseph and that just disappointing scenario that unfolded there. But I wouldn't be surprised if he transferred to Nebraska, and that would sting. But, I bet it stung for him to go to Iowa in the first place. So he's gone, and so that puts our wide receiver room in a really tough spot. Arlen Bruce might go too. He had a really tough year where he didn't get very much targets. We were giving it to him in jet sweeps a lot just to get him the ball. And you would have thought without any other wide receivers from a good chunk of or the early part of the season that he would be flourishing, but it was the opposite. They knew the game plan, take him out of the game plan. We had no wide receivers, especially early on in the season. Ragaini came back. That helped a little bit, but then Ragaini started taking up all the targets. So I wouldn't be surprised if Bruce left too, and which would also really sting. Another sophomore who's got plenty of talent and showed a lot during his freshman year last year. He just didn't have a very good year this year. It didn't work out the way all of us Iowa fans thought it would. Probably didn't work out the way he wanted it to, obviously. He's probably more disappointed than any of us. But he's got a lot of talent, and I would not be surprised if he went somewhere else too. So and that'll be tough. That'll be tough. So, Iowa's got to hit that wide receiver market hard, even if it's a couple of FCS wide receivers, a Power 5 bounce back, whatever it is, JUCO. They got to go hit that wide receiver market hard. Add 2 or 3, because potentially you might only be returning Brody Breck next year. And that'll be, we obviously need a lot of depth at wide receiver. So adding 2 or 3 wide receivers in the portal would be huge. We're bringing in, I think, 3 wide receivers in this next recruiting class, but as freshmen, you don't. Last year was an anomaly with Bruce and Keegan Johnson, ending up being immediate impacts. It's very, very rare that happens under Kirk Ferentz, where a freshman wide receiver makes that much of an impact. So we'll see. That'll be interesting. Now that we got a pretty good quarterback coming in, very competent, good quarterback coming in with McNamara from Michigan. Hopefully we can track some more wide receivers and maybe even another good tight end too our way. And Arlen Harris Jr. is visiting this weekend. He's a former 4-star. Spent his freshman year at Stanford. Is it David Shaw is stepping down from Stanford? They're winning as head coach, and so he entered the transfer portal. And he initially had interest in Iowa too, so that'll be interesting to see him and he seems pretty excited about visiting Iowa. He's been a little bit on Twitter talking about the Hawkeyes, and so it'll be interesting if we could land him too. Him and Caleb Johnson and LaShawn Williams in the backfield next year. Whew. Scary, honestly. That'd be another great addition. And then I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in some transfers on defense too. J.Q. Hardaway from Cincinnati, a former 4-star safety, he entered the portal, and we're losing Kayvon Merriweather this year. So that makes sense to me. And there's a lot of other defenders in the portal too. We'll talk about a little more when I talk about Iowa State. I wouldn't be surprised if we had some there, because who wouldn't want to play in Iowa's defensive system? I mean, especially if you're a defensive back. I mean, we just churn out defensive backs and linebackers. And our D-line is elite this year. It was so good. And obviously Campbell's going to the league. Moss is leaving. But, I mean, we even have Justin Jacobs coming back potentially, too, next year with 2 years of eligibility to go, as he spent this year hurt. He was supposed to maybe be a first or second round draft pick. He might still end up going to the draft, but he's a guy that could return and have a huge impact on defense. So I'm not really worried about the defense for next year. I know Campbell's a huge loss. He's so good. Seth Benson, though, might leave too, but he also has another year of eligibility to come back, so who knows? Kayvon Merriweather most likely out, and maybe Terry Roberts returns, and then if Terry Roberts and Jamar Harris both return, our corners are looking very good next year. Cooper DeJean coming back for another year, at least one more year before the NFL might scoop him away after 3 years. He's so talented. I'm not really worried about the defense, but I mean, this is a huge step, getting McNamara for our offense, and keeping Caden Proctor in Iowa. Huge steps to improving that offense, and then hopefully some staff changes. I won't get into those because I could go on for another hour about those. But yeah, that's the Iowa football segment. All right, let's talk a little Iowa State football. Obviously a disappointing year for the Cyclones, but hey, you did beat Iowa, so that's a huge plus. As an Iowa fan, that stung, but I knew it had to happen eventually. Couldn't keep beating Iowa State forever. And that was obviously early in the season when Iowa State was looking pretty optimistic. That defense all year long until that last game was good. I think Iowa State was just taking one for the team, letting TCU. I'm obviously that's just a joke. Hopefully, that they were taking one for the Big 12 team and letting TCU win pretty against a really, really good Iowa State defense to strengthen their playoff resume. But so I don't think there's much reason to panic if you're an Iowa State fan. I think they got a lot of good bones on that roster right now. Obviously, the big thing is, I think they're going to hit the transfer portal hard. They've hit it before, not like extremely hard, but they pick up a couple transfers every year, and obviously, that's really helped them out on defense this past year. MJ Anderson, I know, was one, and there's probably others too, but I think there's a lot of good talent out there in the transfer portal once again this year, as there will always be, and I think they'll hit it pretty hard. Matt Campbell's got a great culture there. I know the tight end, Deshaun Hanukkah, came out and said, you're either all in and you're not in, and I'm assuming he was referencing the transfer portal, and he's like, he said he refuses to be the laughingstock of the Big 12. And it's crazy. At 4-8 with one win in the conference, they technically end up being a laughingstock. But this team could have very easily been a 9 or 10 win team. Had a lot of close games. They're very similar to Nebraska last year. But so I don't think there's any reason to panic. I think Campbell's gonna get things situated. Obviously, there's some staff questions. I think the biggest one it comes to is special teams. I know the popular thing to think of when it comes to Iowa State is the offense, which is absolutely fair, absolutely warranted. But you can't talk about staff changes with Iowa State without talking about special teams, which they don't actually have a special teams coordinator. And I think they absolutely need to hire one from somewhere and get somebody who can specifically work on special teams. Field goal kicking's bad. Punting was so. And just in general, the punt blocks they let up, punt coverages, kick coverages, and whatnot. It's just been that's been the weak spot over the Campbell tenure is that special teams. And it reared its ugly head again this year. They weren't able to find any consistency in the kicking game. Their field goal kickers struggled each one they put out there. and obviously they obviously need a kicker. They need to add a kicker or two in the transfer portal, and they need something there, and then they need to hire a special teams coordinator. I mean, it's probably not fair to compare this, but I mean, like, look at Iowa's special teams, and they have a special teams coordinator, LeVar Woods, one of the top assistants in the country, who will eventually get a head coaching job. I feel like maybe not, but he runs one of the best special teams unit, and I still think somehow it's underrated. Like, how the hell does Tory Taylor not? I know I'm talking about Iowa again, my bad, but how the hell does Tory Taylor not a Ray Guy finalist for punter of the year? Is that the right? Or is that I think that's the right award. But he's not a punter of the year finalist. He's easily the best punter in the country. I don't watch every single punter in the country, but that's a whole thing. I could rant on and on about that. I won't. I'll move on. But yeah, Iowa State, they need a special teams coach who can thoroughly focus on special teams. Could I just look through their entire staff? They don't have anybody on there. And yeah, and then the offense comes up. They're going to need some wide receivers. They got a freshman coming in, Kai Black. I think he's from Urbandale, I believe. I can double check that. But he looks like another typical Iowa State wide receiver, big-bodied, talented wide receiver coming in. But once again, just a true freshman. And they're going to lose Xavier Hutchinson, All-American wide receiver, soon to be. And I believe Dimitri Stanley is done after this year. He might have another year of eligibility. I should probably look up those things before I just state them randomly, but I mean, Iowa State is I don't think there's any reason to panic. I think they're going to come back and have 8+ wins next year. I just think they'll bounce back. They have a great, and they probably need to give John Haycock a raise because he might have some offers somewhere else, that are really lucrative. So absolutely they need to retain him. And if they move on from Tom Manning, so be it. But he's had success in the past, so. Oh, shoot. Excuse me. Oh, crap. Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, Kai Black is from Urbandale. Alright, cool. And then Benny Ngoy. I think it's Goy. Another big body wide receiver, straight out of Lincoln, Nebraska. Tough loss for the Huskers. Not as tough as Iowa's loss last weekend, though, so tough. So they got two more wide receivers coming in. They'll probably add more. To replace, and who knows, maybe they'll find another JUCO guy who fills in Xavier Hutchinson's shoes. I mean, how long has it been since it's been pretty much 6 straight years of Iowa State having 7 straight years, I guess, of Iowa State having an absolute elite receiver on their receiving staff, just a go-to target. You can go. It's something I can't say as an Iowa fan. The closest we had to something like that is like Marvin McNutt, and he never even got on an official NFL roster, I don't think. But like they had Alan Lazard for 4 years, and then Hakeem Butler starred for 1 year, and then they had Xavier Hutchinson for the last 2 years. And he's going to go have a long career in the NFL. I have no doubt in that. He'll be a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick, I think. But, Iowa State bias is there, so they might push him down on that, which I think is ridiculous. Alan Lazard somehow went undrafted. I still don't know how that happened to this day. And no, he shouldn't be the number 1 wide receiver of the Packers, but he kind of is. Just because they just did a bad job of acquiring receiving talent this past offseason. Because he'd be a really good 2 or 3. Yeah, I think Iowa State's gonna bounce back next year. In that Cy-Hawk game, it'd be fun, man. It'd be fun. I think Deckers is the guy. I do. I just think he just got caught playing too much, trying to play hero ball too much, just trying to do too much, and it stings. But I mean, you look back. I mean, the one I think about is just the Texas game. What could have really defined that loss maybe was just not the last straw for those players, but a huge loss. I mean, they were driving down the field. They were in field goal range, and Hunter Deckers took an absolute blast right on the crown of the head. Clear targeting in my mind from the Texas defender, and he fumbled it. Like, why wouldn't you fumble it when you take a 220-pound guy flying head-to-head contact? Why wouldn't you fumble it? I would have fumbled it before it even hit me. So, like... And then that ended up, Texas ended up kneeling it out and winning that game. And, like, if they win that game, who knows what happens to the confidence of those players. But they came away with a close loss, and they had so many close losses. And Lord knows, close losses don't do anything for players' confidence. If anything, it ruins it more. And that's just how it went. So I think Campbell get it right, get that staff right. Hopefully hires a special teams coordinator, gets another kicker or two in there via the transfer portal, maybe another wide receiver. He needs a legit tight end. I think their tight end as a whole is kind of talented. I mean, like Easton Dean, Deshaun Haneke, but I think they need like a go-to big guy at tight end, like they had in Charlie Kolar. They do like to do tight end by committee. Even when they had Kolar, they had like Dylan Sainer and Chase Allen getting a lot of snaps. But I mean, Chase Allen and Kolar are both very talented dudes, so they need like a dude at tight end. I think would really help that offense out. I think Deshaun Haneke might be that guy. It just depends on how he develops. And Easton Dean's solid, and Tyler Moore is a young guy who might develop too. So we'll see about that. But yeah, I think special teams is obviously the biggest thing to go off, and the biggest improvement they need for Iowa State football. All right, let's dive into a little Iowa basketball. Now, Iowa to start the year off is 6-1. They got wins over Georgia Tech and Seton Hall. They did lose to and Clemson. And none of those teams are particularly like elite or good, but good solid wins to have early on in the season. You never know how the season plays out. Sometimes a win that doesn't look that great ends up being good eventually. Who knows? Seton Hall on the road might end up being a really good win. But this next stretch is the real challenge. Duke for the Jimmy Valvano Classic. Iowa State, who we know how good they are, and then Wisconsin is the next 3 games for Iowa basketball. That'll, depending on how they play in these next 3 games, is really going to show us a lot about this Iowa team, who offensive potential, I think, is definitely through the roof. Defending has always been a struggle during the Fran McCaffrey era. Rebounding's been a struggle. If they can improve on that, I mean, the ceiling on this team is high. I really do believe the ceiling on this Iowa team is high. I think it could be a Big Ten championship caliber. I know Purdue looks awesome. They have 7'11" Zach Edey in there, just a monster, and that he's going to create so many problems. And Illinois has got a really good team too. Michigan State looks good. Obviously, Ohio State, Michigan, Maryland, Wisconsin, they're all going to be in play. Indiana, Indiana, I almost forgot about them. They just beat North Carolina. They look really good as well. And man, if Iowa can win 2 of these next 3 games, that'd be huge. But we'll see. But, I mean, the big 3, in my mind, obviously Chris Murray. He just had 31 points and 20 boards against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech doesn't look like a very good team, but I mean, Chris Murray was phenomenal, and he's been phenomenal for the most part this year. He had 2 kind of tough games against Clemson and TCU where it wasn't very efficient, but still played pretty well. But if so far this year, if he doesn't go, Iowa doesn't really go. So Iowa, And I think Iowa has enough offensive talent where they can go without Chris Murray going, right? And I think the other two most important players on this team have a big part in that. And I think it's obviously Tony Perkins. Tony Perkins, our point guard now, except they have been playing Ulis a lot at point guard, which he's played really well. I think they're in making Tony P more of a scoring combo guard, which is fine too. That's probably his role, but going forward, we'll see how that all shakes out. But Tony Perkins is just a spark plug. He can hit the three. He's got a nice little pull-up J. He can drive the lane. He can finish through contact with that big broad shoulders of his, and he can hit free throws. And he's a decent playmaker as well. So he can provide everything you want in a guard. He's a big-bodied 6'4" guard, and he's got a ton of energy. I think at the next level, the NBA, he profiles as a great bench piece. But he's so important to this success. I know against TCU, he had a bad first half, and then he got going in the second half, had a really good second half. Helped Iowa try to close the gap. Iowa didn't. Chris Murray wasn't going, so that's another thing. And then Christian McCaffrey, I said that wrong, sorry. Connor McCaffrey, yikes. Christian McCaffrey, who's never played for Iowa. He torched Iowa in the Rose Bowl a couple years ago. 6-year senior Connor McCaffrey, I think, is the third most important player on this team. He's been in the program in his dad's offense, and he's going to be a great coach one of these days. I think when the chips are down, he'll go after you, but he's kind of mellowed out too as a player. He's taken on the mantle more of a leader than when his younger years he'd go out there getting people's faces, getting that technical foul. I think he'll still do that. He's got that in him, obviously, but I think he's matured a little bit on the court, and he's just a leader of that second unit, and we need him to keep scoring because now he looks like a good shooter, and we haven't seen that from him. We saw some flashes last year of it, but he looks like a legit scorer of the basketball this year, and that'll be huge because on that bench is something we needed to figure out this year for Iowa. And freshman DeSante Bowen looks legit, freshman point guard. He's got a lot of explosiveness. He's so fast. He's been hitting some three-pointers. Aaron Ulis has been starting, so he was supposed to be a big part of that bench, and Ulis has looked really good this year. I think he's had a nice little developmental offseason and has taken a nice jump here into his junior year, redshirt sophomore year, something like that. And he's going to be a big part of that bench. But Christian McCaffrey leading that second unit is going to be huge. And just him to be a 6-year senior and come off the bench in his dad's, that's admirable in its own way. You might not think it's that impressive, but that's fine. I think that's cool by him. A guy who came to Iowa and played basketball and baseball for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it was. And now he's been focusing fully on basketball, and, he's starting to, take off as a scorer, and that's huge. But this next stretch of games will really tell us a lot about this Iowa team. I'm really excited about it. I think they're going to continue to get better. Chris Murray is going to be a continual player of the year candidate all year long, just like his older brother was. He's it's just like Keegan, except he's left-handed, and he's the perfect mesh of athleticism, that perfect middle point between athleticism and fundamentals. He's not the best athlete on the floor every single night, but he has the best blend of athleticism and fundamentals on the court every single night, in my opinion. And he's got just a nice, relaxed, calm, quick shooting motion from the left-hand slot. And he's a great three-point shooter. He's been terrific in the mid-range, and obviously his inside scoring ability and his fast break scoring ability is absolutely there. It's been there all year so far. And the rebounding, that's something I thought Keegan Murray lacked a little bit last year. Not that he wasn't a good rebounder, he was a little inconsistent at times and inconsistent as a defender. I think Keegan Murray has shown some of those same lapses as a defender, but as a rebounder, Keegan Murray has been a great rebounder, obviously showcased by that 20 rebound game he had against Georgia Tech, which to get 20 rebounds takes some luck, obviously, but still, what a phenomenal game he played. as the catalyst in that game for Iowa. But we'll see how this stretch goes for the Hawks, and hopefully they win two out of three. That'd be crazy. All right, to finish off this new pod of mine, let's talk a little Iowa State basketball. They hit the transfer portal hard again this offseason. TJ Otzelberger, man, he's a heck of a coach. There's no doubt in that. What a phenomenal turnaround he had to, 2-win Iowa State team or whatever it was. I don't know. It was a terrible Iowa State team 2 years ago. And then last year he took him to the Sweet 16 in his first year as head coach. Unreal. And then he lost some guys this offseason. Obviously the biggest one being Tyrese Hunter. Just a kind of out of nowhere transfer to Texas. But, I mean, TJ Otzelberger didn't sweat it. He just went out there and recruited his ass off, right? And he brought in some good transfers. Obviously, kind of on the top of that was Jaron Holmes. Osuni. I mean, who was the other one? Kind of big one. Maybe it was Holmes and Osuni. And of course, returning Aljaz Kuntz and Caleb Grill. Caleb Grill had a monster game against North Carolina. That was amazing. And bringing in Tamin Lipsey, man, yeah, from Ames, Iowa. Really good high school career at Ames, both football and basketball. He's been playing really well. Robert Jones came back. Gabe Kalshear came back. A guy who might go for 2 one night and then 22 the next night. But, man, I just think that's something. They had a huge Thanksgiving weekend. Obviously, they beat Villanova, I think that one will look better and better as the year goes along. And then they beat North Carolina, who hasn't been playing very well this year, but nonetheless, North Carolina was number one at that time, and I think they're so talented. I think they'll get things sorted out and be a top 10 team by the end of the year. And then they did lose to UConn on Sunday night. And then beat North Dakota. I think that was last night. But something with Iowa State, what's going to come down to, I think every single game, is how the officiating crew calls the game. Because Iowa State obviously focuses on just elite defense, but they're very physical. So if you got a touchy-feely officiating crew, it might be a bad night for Iowa State. Offensively, they're not an amazing team. They're a solid offensive team with guys who can score the ball. Like Caleb Grill, very streaky, but we saw what he could do when he's hot. Obviously, Jaron Holmes has been a pretty consistent scorer. Gabe Kalshear is very, very streaky. Robert Jones off and on. But I think it just comes down to the officiating against, when they play those really good teams. It's going to, and as Iowa State's luck usually has it, they might be on the wrong side of that, but they're such a physical team. Like if there's a crew that calls a lot of the ticky-tacky stuff, it might be a long night. It's going to be a long night a lot of times this year for Iowa State basketball. And like if we're previewing the Iowa State matchup, Iowa's a pretty good free throw shooting team. And we saw Iowa State just shut down Iowa's offense last year. I mean, Keegan Murray finished with 12 points or something. It could be wrong there, but they shut down Keegan Murray. They shut down the entire offense, and just kind of dominated Iowa, out physical them, out everything. And the officiating crew, was so-so. And I feel like this Iowa State team's even more polarized. Like, That's right. I don't know. They're even more physical than last year's Iowa State team, more defensive oriented. So with Iowa, who's a good free throw shooting team, I think depending on that the officiating crew is going to play into that so much. Like if they're calling all the ticky-tacky stuff, I mean, Iowa might end up winning that game because they make 20 free throws or 15 to 23 throws. So we'll see. And then, depends on how they can stop Chris Murray. And obviously they'll look at the TCU tape. They'll look at the Clemson tape. I think Clemson, it was just an off shooting night for Murray, but like TCU was able to shut down Murray pretty well. So I mean, they shut down Keegan Murray last year. So I mean, honestly, to me, I mean, Keegan just definitely kind of had a bad shooting night, but also at the same time, I mean, Iowa State game planned the heck out of that and just dominated Iowa pretty much in all three facets of that game. And man, Brockington, what a game he had for Iowa State that game. What a year he had for Iowa State. But nonetheless, it's definitely. But I mean, Otzelberger's got that Iowa State program. They're going to be among the elite for however long he stays there. He's got a top 5 recruiting class coming in next year too, and then who knows? Like he'll probably add 2 more really good recruits on the transfer portal too. Like he's got that program on the up and up, and when I say up and up, I mean skyrocketing. So I thoroughly believe Iowa State basketball is going to continue to be elite as long as he's there. And they need to be, because Big 12 has kind of quietly become the best basketball conference in the country. So they need that. They need what he has been bringing to the table. And all those really good teams, all those really good programs in the Big 12 are just built on studly physicality and defense. I don't know why I said studly, but it happens. So we'll move past it. All right, just to finish this thing up, so we went over a little Iowa and Iowa State football, transfer portal stuff, and kind of off-season plans. I can kind of develop more on those off-season plans and what I think they should do, what might happen, what needs to happen, what will happen as we go along. And then a little Iowa State basketball. Really looking forward to that matchup. Iowa and Iowa State in basketball. It's potentially, depending on how that outcome comes against Duke for Iowa, it might be a top 25 matchup. Who knows? But we'll see. And then one thing I just wanted to talk about just briefly here that I didn't talk about earlier was Iowa bowl game. Hopefully they go to that like Music City Bowl. They were supposed to go in 2020, but Mizzou canceled on it because of COVID. But like something like that, I think if they end up in Music City Bowl, I think a lot of Iowa fans will be there. It'll be a fun little bowl game. Nashville. And then we'll see like who starts that game for Iowa. Obviously McNamara's coming in to be our quarterback next year. But like, will we see Joey Labus or will Petrus start one more game for the Hawkeyes? Because he did hurt his arm. We don't really know how serious that is yet. And if it is kind of serious, do we see Joey Labus as the quarterback for the first time in Iowa? And it would be fun to see that. I don't know if it'll be good for Iowa's offense or not. Chances are anything for Iowa's offense usually isn't good this year, but will we see that, and will it be encouraging moving forward if he shows some flashes in that game? Could he be our next in line after McNamara? Anyways, thanks for listening, those who did. I hope you enjoyed my hot and cold takes, or lukewarm takes if you want to call them what you want to call them. Appreciate anybody who listens. This is another podcast by me, Sean Cutler. We're still workshopping names. We'll figure out one eventually, hopefully. And thank you.